The US tech giant Apple will not have to pay Ireland €13 billion in back taxes. The ruling from the EU's second highest court is a blow to the European Commission's tax avoidance crackdown. It had argued that the iPhone maker was given illegal tax breaks by the Irish government and that those breaks gave the country an unfair economic advantage over other EU member states. Jeremy East has this report.
For the European Commission, Ireland's arrangement with Apple was an unfair and illegal sweetheart deal that allowed the tech giant to pay extremely low tax rates. But that view isn't shared by the EU's General Court. Its ruling emphatically stated that the Commission had not succeeded in showing to the requisite legal standard that Apple had any advantage. The court also said that the Commission was wrong to declare that Apple had been granted a selective economic advantage and, by extension, state aid. The EU executive says that it's now considering its next steps.
The Commission stands fully behind the objective that all companies should pay their fair share of tax. If Member States give certain multinational companies tax advantages not available to their rivals, this harms fair competition in the EU. And it also deprives the public purse and citizens of funds for much-needed investments.
The decision has been welcomed by Apple. In a statement, the company said that the case was not about how much tax was paid, but where, adding it was proud to be the world's largest taxpayer. And the Irish government also expressed satisfaction at the judgment, saying the Commission's order has damaged Ireland's reputation.
This is a matter that has caused reputational difficulty for Ireland during the many years in which it has played out. This is why the ruling of this morning is so important, because this matter makes clear that there was no evidence available to make the case that Ireland had granted preferential treatment to a taxpayer.
The ruling is not only a major setback for Brussels' corporate taxation policy plans, but it also deprives Ireland and the rest of the EU of billions of euros at a time when the bloc is struggling to rebuild economies that have been shattered by the COVID crisis. Jeremy East, Euronews.
And welcome to The Bridge, where we bring you a nightly instalment of news. We are focusing on this Apple story with MEP Barry Andrews. He's an Irish MEP, sits with the Renew Europe group and aligned with the new Prime Minister in Ireland. Barry, what do you make of this ruling? They're saying they're upholding the Irish position that Apple shouldn't be paying this €13 billion. Is it a win? Do you feel it's a win?
Look, to the outside observer, it looks perverse that we would challenge an award of €13 billion when, like every jurisdiction, public funds are in short supply. But what you have to remember is that there are hundreds of companies in Ireland that have invested in Ireland, and we're looking at this decision and wondering, was Ireland dealing with companies in an even-handed way? So the potential damage to Ireland's reputation in terms of inward investment, in terms of companies that have already invested in Ireland, was really enormous. So that's the reason we had to contest what seemed to be a great award for Ireland in terms of applying to social services. It makes sense in those terms.
How does it go down with voters, though? It can't be popular. It's a struggle to push this to sort of celebrate this as a new coalition government.
It is difficult. People think we're mad to have made this decision, but we made it on the basis of a short-term gain would have been great, but the long-term loss to Ireland would have been really damaging. I think reputationally it would have been damaging in terms of the way in which our revenue commissioners make decisions around tax rulings, the way in which the Irish government is straight with investors who potentially are going to come into Ireland and create jobs. So in the short term it might have been good, and yes, opposition politicians are going to make hay out of this, but in the long term it would have been very damaging.
Now, you talked about reputation. What about the reputation of the European Commission? Margrethe Vestager, the EU sort of competition chief, she's been pushing against a lot of these big multinational companies for a while. This award was only in the second highest court in the EU. She hasn't said it yet, but she's probably likely to challenge it. What are your predictions and what are your expectations from a potential appeal from the European Commission?
Well, as most people know by now, you can only appeal on a point of law, and this is a very fact-heavy case. So it may not be fertile ground in terms of a potential appeal, and the window for an appeal is about 2 months. But everybody expects there to be an appeal. Perhaps the issue of the burden of proof might be a ground in which the Commission could take an appeal on the basis that in the General Court it was found the European Commission had to prove that there was an advantage to Apple. If that's reversed, then the Irish government has to make that burden of proof. That could be a ground for an appeal. But, and I respect the Commission, are going to have to look at a very detailed judgment before they make that final decision.
Now, we saw the Commission lose a similar case, a Starbucks case. They won one against Fiat. They had that upheld. They've got 2 more, IKEA and Nike, however you want to say it. How do you see what Brussels should be doing? Because it's quite a popular move to tackle the sort of tax-avoiding multinationals. But countries like yours are challenging Brussels on it. How does the Commission move forward well to keep that balance?
Well, look, I know people say this, but I have huge admiration for Margaret Vestager and what she's doing. The Irish government very much supports changes to global tax. It supports the idea that digital companies should pay more tax, but it believes very strongly that this should be done at a global level, not at a regional or national level. So we have been supporting the process at OECD to look at both the question of where tax should be levied and how much tax should be levied. A lot of progress has been made on the earlier of those 2 processes, but of course America has pulled out of that. So there's going to be some delay in this, but I think a global approach is the only way to make sure that smaller countries like ourselves are not going to be disadvantaged by changes that take place.
You mentioned a new change in taxation, and actually the European Commission outlined a new taxation structure which is very multifaceted. We don't have enough time to really go into all of it now, but it was largely overshadowed by this Apple ruling. How do you think are you in favour of an EU digital tax, so an EU-wide tax that comes straight into the Commission? Might that help alleviate some of these issues?
Yeah, I mean, I read Mr. Gentilone's article in the Financial Times today, and he continues to refer to Ireland as a tax haven, which we really bitterly dispute. You know, people don't realise that Apple have been in Ireland since 1980. They employ 6,000 people, many other jobs created downstream. So we really dispute that characterisation, but we certainly believe that digital companies should pay more tax. We certainly believe that there should be changes to the way in which digital companies contribute, particularly post-COVID and the teleworking that we're all doing. But we don't believe it should be done at EU level. We think it should be done at global level and by the OECD.
Barry Andrews, thank you so much for joining us on The Bridge. As Barry says, it's a hard sell for taxpayers around Europe to hear, though, that a country isn't reaping 13 billion euros as the Commission had ordered tax.
Jack Parrack there reporting on that landmark decision by the European General Court.